That's the story of Goldie Hawn, one of the most beloved, big-hearted stars in Hollywood history. To audiences, she's always been the ray of sunshine, the one with the giggle that could light up an entire room. But behind the smile, she's had to deal with some pretty ugly behavior from some of the industry's most powerful men. And here's the twist. She's never been the type to go on TV and air all her grievances. No screaming matches, no dramatic headlines, no tell-all memoirs spilling dirt. Instead, she's handled things with quiet grace and a personal blacklist of people she decided she'd never work with again. So today, we're going behind the scenes. You're going to hear about the 6 men who made life so miserable on set or off that Goldie cut them off for good. And trust me, some of these names are going to surprise you. Let's start with a Hollywood icon, Kirk Douglas. To the world, he was the definition of old school charm, the dashing leading man, the gentleman from another era. But to Goldie, well, it wasn't so charming. Over the years, at industry parties, charity events, and award shows, Douglas had this way of treating her like she was still the bikini-clad blonde from decades earlier. Never mind the fact she'd built a career as one of the most bankable and respected actors of her time. It was little things over and over. Theatrical winks, slow, lingering hand kisses, over-the-top greetings in front of crowds that made it feel more like a performance than genuine warmth. Some people saw it as harmless flirtation. Goldie saw it as a subtle reminder that in his eyes, she wasn't an equal. She was a prop. He'd interrupt her during panels, dismiss her opinions in roundtable discussions, and when she co-produced a film and started sharing her vision for its emotional core, he cut in mid-sentence with a patronizing joke about how she always knows how to sell emotion. The room laughed. She didn't. She closed her notebook and calmly said, "I've said what I need to say," before walking out. She never publicly trashed him. She never started a feud. But privately, she began drawing a clear line. As she put it years later to a friend, "Some men don't deserve a second act in your memory. They had their spotlight. I'm not holding the flashlight for them anymore." From old Hollywood condescension to modern-day manipulation. Enter Warren Beatty. In the 1970s, Warren wasn't just a movie star. He was an entire brand. Suave, magnetic, and, according to decades of gossip, a man who viewed dating like a competitive sport. When Goldie hit her peak, Beatty set his sights on her. He pulled out all the stops, fancy lunches, charming dinner conversations, hovering near her at parties with drinks in hand and compliments ready. Most people would be swept up in that. Goldie? Not so much. She knew the history. She knew she didn't want to be another short chapter in his long book of conquests. So she politely turned him down, but Warren Beatty didn't like hearing no. The invite stopped, but something else started. Goldie's name started coming up in quiet, unflattering whispers. Producers suddenly thought she was difficult. Directors questioned if she could handle serious roles. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Opportunities slowed down. Meetings got rescheduled. Scripts never made it to her. It wasn't career-ending sabotage. It was the quieter, deadlier kind. And in Hollywood, those kinds of rumors are poison. Years later, at a glittering awards show, they crossed paths again. Beatty smiled like nothing had ever happened. Goldie matched it with a smile cold enough to freeze hell and walked away without a word. That was her final say on the matter. Then there's Chevy Chase. If you've seen Foul Play, you know the on-screen chemistry between Goldie and Chevy was electric. Audiences loved them. But behind the scenes, the vibe was anything but fun. At that time, Chevy had just left Saturday Night Live and was riding the wave of fame. And with fame came ego, lots of it. He'd rewrite lines on the fly, toss out entire scenes if they didn't amuse him, and refuse to shoot anything he didn't personally approve of. For Goldie, who was known for her professionalism and kindness on set, it was exhausting. Chevy would interrupt her takes, scoff at her comedic timing, and even make comments questioning her talent, once telling a producer she was lucky to be in his orbit. By the final weeks of shooting, they barely spoke unless the cameras were rolling. When studios floated the idea of a sequel, Goldie's answer was instant and final. Not interested. Now, if Chevy was difficult, Bill Murray took things to another level. The first table read for their planned comedy should have been exciting. 2 big comedic names, a fresh script, a buzzing studio. But Murray strolled in over an hour late, no apology, cracking jokes at the expense of junior writers. When they finally started reading, Murray hijacked scene after scene, replacing carefully written dialogue with his own gags. He rolled his eyes, made faces during Goldie's lines, and mocked the tone of the film. Then came the breaking point. In the middle of a heartfelt scene, Goldie was delivering a quiet, emotional line. When Murray looked at her and said, "Why don't you try acting like you've done drama before?" The room laughed. Goldie didn't. She closed her script, stood up, and left. The next day, her team called the studio. No discussions, no apologies. She was out. The project died, and so did any chance of them working together again. But the most cutting moment of all, that came from Sean Penn, and it didn't even happen on a film set. It was at a star-studded charity gala for mental health, a cause deeply important to Goldie. She was invited to speak, and the room was filled with advocates and celebrities. A few tables away, Penn sat slouched in his chair, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. As Goldie walked to the podium, he rolled his eyes dramatically, sighed loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, and muttered something about another celebrity wellness sermon. Goldie delivered her speech anyway, earnest, heartfelt, powerful. And when she finished, Penn's voice cut through the applause. "She should stick to giggling." She smiled, raised her champagne glass, and left soon after. But in the car ride home, she told a friend, "After all these years, I'm still reduced to giggles by men who have no idea what I stand for." From that night on, she refused to appear at any event with him, and finally, Dustin Hoffman. Goldie was auditioning for a dramatic film, a pivot she'd been carefully planning to show she could do more than comedy. Hoffman was already attached to the project, which meant the role carried prestige. But a few lines into the audition, Hoffman stopped everything. "You're not connecting," he said flatly. Then he turned to the producers and added, "She's still playing it like a sitcom." The room laughed nervously. It wasn't feedback, it was humiliation. Goldie finished the scene without flinching, walked out, and the next morning told her agent, "I won't fight to be taken seriously by men who already decided I'm a punchline." She dropped out, the role was recast, and she never worked with him again. What's striking in all these stories is how Goldie handled them. She didn't explode, she didn't trash anyone in the press, she didn't write a revenge memoir. She simply removed herself. With Kirk Douglas, she refused to play along with condescension. With Warren Beatty, she didn't reward manipulation. With Chevy Chase, she cut off a toxic working dynamic. With Bill Murray, she walked away from disrespect. With Sean Penn, she refused to share space with someone who mocked her purpose. And with Dustin Hoffman, she chose dignity over chasing approval. Goldie's not naive. She's seen Hollywood at its best and its worst. But instead of letting the bad moments define her, she defined herself. She built a career on her terms. She protected her peace long before "protect your peace" was a popular phrase. And she proved that sometimes the loudest way to say no is to simply never say yes again. So maybe that's the real takeaway. You don't always have to fight the people who mistreat you. Sometimes the most powerful move is to walk away, keep shining, and let time show the difference between a legend and someone who only plays one on screen. If you enjoyed this peek behind Hollywood's curtain, give it a like, share it with a friend who loves movie history, and stick around because there are plenty more untold stories waiting to be told.